Understanding the importance of Greece's contributions to democracy and the vast lessons debate and diplomacy played in their complicated history. Modern governments can learn from the example from the past. Democracy. What is democracy? There are two different kinds of democratic government: direct democracy and limited representative government. Athens was governed by a direct democracy. A direct democracy is when citizens vote and debate directly on laws and actively participate in political decisions. To be able to participate in the Athenian democracy, one must be a male, over the age of 20, own land, and an Athenian-born citizen. Like many other major civilizations of the ancient world, there were major conflicts between the rich and the poor. In most civilizations, if you were lower class, you could not vote or participate in the government and were denied basic human rights by society. Some of the biggest impacts in the Athenian democracy occurred in 621 BC, when a noble named Draco developed the city's first written law code. It stated that regardless of social class, all Athenian citizens are equal under the law. In 594 BC, debt slavery was outlawed by Solon. He also put in place the concept that any citizen could press charges against a criminal. Finally, in 500 BC, Cleisthenes ended the power of nobility when he classified people based on where they lived, not their social class. Unfortunately, slaves, women, and foreigners were excluded from these reforms. As part of their daily lives, Athenians debated several issues, such as land ownership, diplomatic policies, laws, judicial, civil matters, which included the ability to exile citizens. The god Hermes, messenger of the gods, is also the god of democracy and guarded the diplomatic representatives. Greek diplomats today can be traced back to Hermes' influence. Apraxenos was a paid Greek ambassador tasked with keeping diplomatic peace among the city-states and would use his influence to promote alliances and advocate for government policies. Many other factors influenced Athens' democracy and diplomacy, and one of them was a rivalry between Athens and the city-state Sparta.
In order to fully learn from the lessons of the classical age in Greece, we must also look at the relationship between ancient Athens and Sparta, and how rivalry and war were fueled by debate and failed diplomacy. Although many city-states feuded with one another, adding to their lack of unity, the polarity between Athens and Sparta was further driven by their geographical proximity, ideological differences, and Sparta's involvement in overthrowing the Athenian tyrants and leading aristocratic families. Still, Athens and Sparta united to fight Persian rule. However, throughout the Persian War, failed diplomacy and debate between the Greek generals and Persians incited animosity, extending the war and further leading to the Peloponnesian War. In the early 5th century BCE, Persia, the mightiest power in the Mediterranean, first conflicted with Greece by conquering Lydia, which ruled some of the city-states. King Cyrus, unwilling to extend diplomacy, did not honor the Greek customs and resented the Greeks for their refusal to aid in conquering Lydia. Island rebels later tried to revolt from the new king's rule and sought support from mainland Greece. Ionia, attacking Lydia with the aid of Athens and Eretria, was defeated. Still seeking vengeance for mainland Greece's support, Persia planned to attack. While some city-states acquiesced to Persian ambassadors' demands, Athens and Eretria thwarted their ambush. After 10 years, Persia prepared for a second invasion at the Battle of Thermopylae. Although King Leonidas and his troops fought valiantly, they were defeated, leaving much of Greece under Persian rule. After consulting the Oracle of Delphi, Athenians disagreed on the meaning of the oracle's prediction that a wooden wall would ensure their safety. Some concluded that the wall was the Acropolis, assembled in Athens, leading to its parish. While others, who believed the wall was the Greek fleet, fought together in the Battle of Salamis, where they successfully deceived the Persians and defeated them by ramming their trapped ships. Again, during the Battle of Plataea, the Greeks debated strategy when the Spartan general Amompharetus refused to retreat to the town of Plataea, leaving the Greeks open for attack. Luckily, the Spartan forces were able to wage their own vengeance, crushing the Persian infantry while the entire Persian fleet was set on fire. At the Battle of Mycale, ending the war. As the Persian War ended, Sparta and Athens created the Peloponnesian and Delian Leagues to fight off future invasion. Athens' true plan to expand their empire and jealousy further spurred their rivalry. When the Athenian government allied themselves with Corcyra, Corinth convinced Sparta to join the fight against Athens, thus starting the Peloponnesian War. Ultimately, after Sparta liberated the city-states, numerous battles and plague in Athens, the Peace of Nicias Treaty was signed. However, tensions rose again when Athens sent ships to their allies in Sicily in 415 BCE. Believing false spy intel that Athens was going to conquer Italy, Sparta allied themselves with Sicily's invaders, Syracuse, destroyed the Athenian fleet, compelling them to surrender in 404 BCE. This war acted as a turning point in ancient Greek history, where democracy fell, the Athenian Empire disbanded, preventing the city-states from creating another empire in the region, and all Greek forces were weakened, leading to the Macedonian conquest in 338 BCE. As many sources describing the Peloponnesian War are from the Athenians, these facts may be propaganda. However, these recollections can still shed some light on the importance of successful debate and diplomacy.
Ancient Greek democracy was a major influence on the development of the United States democracy. However, there are many differences between the two ideologies. There are many aspects of ancient Greek democracy that are not used today. The people had a lot of power in ancient Greece's democracy. In Athens, the citizens had the right to vote someone out of Athens and put them in exile. All citizens were allowed to debate topics and vote in the democracy. But to be considered a citizen, you need to be a free adult male who was born in Athens. In Athens, laws are voted on directly by the people. This is considered a direct democracy. While in the U.S., representatives of the people vote on laws. This is an example of a representative democracy. The executive branch of Athenian democracy was run by a council of 500, while the U.S. executive branch was made up of elected officials. Compared to the U.S. democracy, the Athenian democracy gave much more power to the people directly rather than giving them the power to have someone represent them. Despite the several differences between these two democratic ideas, they both have similar concepts. They are both based on the idea of political power being used by citizens. Both democracies have three branches of government, which have similar roles to each other. Both legislative branches pass laws, both executive branches carry out laws, and both judicial branches conduct trials. According to reports at the end of 2017, 96 out of 167 countries in the world were democracies. This takes into account countries with populations of at least 500,000 people. Democracy can be defined today as a government in which laws, policies, leadership, and major undertakings of a state or other policy are directly or indirectly decided by the people. There were several amendments to the Constitution allowing for more people to be treated as equals in a democratic society. When the Civil War ended and the 13th Amendment was passed, African Americans were freed from slavery but were not given full citizenship despite what they had hoped for. Over time, all states created black codes that limited the rights of African Americans even more. As time went on, a reconstructed Congress would eventually pass the 14th Amendment into the Constitution, allowing for equality under the law for all citizens. And if states didn't follow through by refusing votes to African Americans, they would have seats in the House of Representatives removed. Eventually, the 15th Amendment would also be passed in 1869, which forbid any state from denying suffrage due to race. As time went on, women wanted to gain suffrage. That would be the only way to be sure the government could protect children, foster education, and support family life. As time went on from the 1890s through 1917, states slowly allowed women's suffrage until the 19th Amendment would eventually be passed. And on August 18, 1920, the House of Representatives passed the 19th Amendment allowing full voting rights to women. Due to the action of the Dawes Act, many aspects of the Native American culture and society were destroyed. This would finally lead to the Snyder Act, which in 1924 admitted full U.S. citizenship to Native Americans. Despite this, it still took over 50 years for each state to finally allow Native Americans to have voting rights. After all of this, all U.S. citizens were finally able to vote and be a true part of the democracy. The ancient Greek democracy was much more of a full democracy than the U.S. All citizens had to be part of the government. Because they had direct democracy and voted on laws themselves with their personal opinions, their voice had much more power than our country does today. The United States, however, is not a true democracy. U.S. citizens vote for people to represent them, but those people may not help in the way their voters needed or expected. Not everyone's opinion is taken into account in the U.S. An example of this is when George Floyd was killed. People had to protest and riot because they felt they were not heard by the government. In ancient Greece, however, everyone had an opportunity to share their view. While the United States is a democracy, based on the true definition of democracy in ancient Greece, the United States is not a democracy.
We unite with our friends around the globe to foster better diplomatic relationships so everyone's voice is heard.